Andy Martino of the Daily News, Jim Duquette, who is the only one not hacking on this set. Jeez, there's coughs galore going on around here.
That's what happens at the winter meetings. You get sick.
Too many people in one small space. All right, so now that I use code language talking to Terry Collins and Sandy Alderson because nothing's official. And, you know, if you're wondering, you can't comment when nothing is done. He's got to pass the physical first. My headset is yanking off my head. There we go. All right. Guys, we could talk about it, though. I happen to think it's a good move. I really do. I think it's a perfect length. I think he's the best pitcher out there. Andy, how about you?
Yeah, this is great. The reporter portion of the program, and Jim's on the dark side now. So you're with us in the media. We can talk about this. We can acknowledge. I can tell you for a fact that the Mets have agreed to terms with Bartolo Colon, 2-year, $20 million deal. The team can't acknowledge that until he passes a physical. Kevin, I agree with you. I think it's a great signing for the Mets. I was not taking them seriously as a potential wild card contender next year. And I don't think really anybody was because they'd lost Matt Harvey. Hey, if you don't replace him at the top of the rotation, Wheeler, Neese, and G is not enough. Wheeler's not developed enough yet, and the other two guys, I don't think you know what you're going to get. So you needed a top of the rotation guy. The Mets went out and got it. They actually were true to their word that they could stretch the budget for a player that was right. That validates what Sandy Alderson had been saying. So really, I mean, we will sit here and make fun of them year in and year out. But on this one, good job, Mets. It's a great sighting, and I think it makes them a relevant team going into spring training for the first time in a couple of years.
I think the logic was, okay, well, they're going to sign a couple of veteran guys who've been around and going to give you some innings, but they didn't. They went on a guy, Jim, who's good, and Sandy just said at the top of the show that more willing now with that to give that fifth spot to one of their young guys.
Sure.
You know, let them prove it.
Well, and they should. I think really with a guy like Henry Mejia, who for me should be the front runner, what we saw out of him at the end, why not? Look at what he did with the fastball, how the curveball really developed. I'll tell you, Colon is such an enigma, really, when you look at him. He's a guy who was caught with PEDs, but he's about 35 pounds, 40 pounds overweight, right? He's 40 years old, and he's got one pitch, but he goes deep into the game, which nobody does. So I think when I talk to Billy Beane about Colon, he'll do wonders for the young pitchers. A guy like Mejia in particular, or even a Montero who's, you know, waiting in the wings. Colon has been a mentor to those type of guys for the A's. So I like that even from the secondary or ancillary point that he'll be a leader in the clubhouse for some of the young guys.
What's next? What's next for this team? I mean, Terry said bullpen. He'd like to see the bullpen get better with a veteran. And then there's still the shortstop thing. You know, what's the most pressing thing next?
I don't think that Ruben Tejada would be at that fitness camp in Michigan if the Mets weren't really serious about making him the shortstop next year. That's a real tell. What the Mets do with their players in the offseason, like Davis isn't in the holiday video, those things can be a tell to their intentions. Really, we've seen that in the past. So I think Ruben Tejada really could be the shortstop. I don't think they're going to go more than 2 years on Stephen Drew. Maybe Stephen Drew falls to that, but that market has yet to really become clear. So I think it could be Tejada. They could sign a backup guy like a Cesar Torres and just kind of throw it out there like that. I don't think that that's going to kill them. They've still made themselves a better team. And as Alderson said the other day, they might just have to live with some weaknesses. We're not talking about the 98 Yankees next year. We're talking about a team with holes that has finally begun to fill them. Well, and that might not be one of them.
Sandy said, you know, he said really, I asked him if they had more recognizance on Davis. I asked him if they had a better feel what they can get back, and he said not really.
Right.
So that tells me that they're not really close at all on Ike Davis. And I think you could wait a little bit on that. I think now, in the next couple days, maybe next week, Jim, they need to get in on the back end of the bullpen deal.
I agree with you. And there's 4 teams on Ike, by the way, but no one has offered anything of substance. Right. You know, and I'll throw Baltimore and Pittsburgh into the mix with Tampa and Milwaukee. Right now, that's pretty quiet. But I agree with you. The back end of the bullpen, I talked to a couple of people, and the Mets are going to end up meeting with the agent for John Axford and Kevin Gregg, same with Jeff Boris, that group out of California. And those two are interesting. Axford is a guy, obviously, we know has save potential, and so does Kevin Gregg. Gregg didn't end well. He threw the front office under the bus a little bit last year. He's not going to be able to get a ton of money, but they're also guys that could transition into the 8th inning when Parnell's healthy, like we were talking about last night. So and that's a market that's starting to move a little bit. Maybe not by the time we leave here, but sometime towards this weekend. You're going to see some of these names, maybe not Belfour for the Mets, but some of those other names, they're going to move off, and that'll make Gregg and Axford, some of these other guys, more affordable. Maybe they go sooner.